It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Gabriel Foley. He's the coordinator for the 3rd Maryland D.C. Breeding Bird Atlas. Gabriel, thanks for joining me today.
It's great to be here, Donna.
I love talking about birds, and it seems you do too. Your bio on the Western Maryland Resource Conservation and Development Council's website, it says you're an avid birder and you're from Saskatchewan, Canada. Yeah?
I am, yes.
So how did you end up in Maryland?
Short story, I saw the job ad and applied for it, and here I am. Slightly longer version, I love breeding bird atlases, and so this was like kind of a dream job for me.
Okay, so what is a breeding bird atlas?
It is this incredible community science effort where volunteers go out and essentially document every species of bird that's breeding in a region. Everywhere that they occur, the whole region is split up into this grid of 3 by 3 mile blocks, and people go into every single one of these. In Maryland and DC, there's over 1,300 of them. They go into each one of these 3 by 3 mile blocks and document every species that they find there and how likely it is to be breeding.
So you want people to sign up to help you. That's one thing. Or do you already have enough people that go through these?
We're always looking for more people.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do people contact you?
They can do that on the website. That's probably the easiest way.
And the website is?
ebird.org/atlasmddc.
Generally, the people that will be doing this in their own blocks where they live or work, right?
You can actually do this anywhere that you want to across the region. Essentially, if you see a bird, you can put it into the Atlas database.
Okay. And if you already have breeding birds in your backyard, as I do, it's not hard to learn. The one thing is you can't just go into eBird and enter them as you normally would.
Right.
Which is the first thing I did. And I realized I was wrong in doing that, which is fine. You can do that, but it's not getting to you, right?
That's right. And so eBird is this community science database where people can enter in checklists of birds that they see. And so bird watchers use this as a tool regularly, both for keeping track of their species lists and for contributing to, bird conservation. And the Atlas uses this, and in Maryland and DC, if you want it to go to the Atlas, you have to submit it through what's called the Atlas portal.
Right. So it's this whole separate area. So don't go into the regular eBird and enter your 2 lovebirds. In my case, it's barred owls, into that area. You're going into the Maryland DC Breeding Bird Atlas on eBird and enter them in there. And then are you entering them every single time you hear them or see them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can do it as much or as little as you like, but the more often you do it, the more information we have about the birds.
So in other words, I have to go back in today because my birds were outside last night doing their love calls to one another. How long will this be running, and how many bird atlases? Obviously, this is the 3rd one for this area.
That's right.
And these will be continuing on through the rest of our history as long as we're here, right?
I mean, or as long as the birds are here,
right.
Which, based on some recent research,
Grim.
They are going downhill.
Right.
So.
What birds have you seen already come in, other than my barred owls, have you seen come into the Atlas that have made you stop and say, that's cool?
Well, bald eagles, they're nesting already, and birders were really excited to get involved with the Atlas. So they basically went out. I mean, it just started in January.
Right.
They basically went out and have kind of covered the region for bald eagles. And if you look at a map on the Atlas database, you can see where all these observations have come in.
Oh, I didn't even see the map yet. Now I'm excited.
Yeah, you can almost make out the outline of Maryland and DC, and it's just where bald eagles have been seen. It's fascinating.
That's cool. Okay, so because our listeners know that WNAV is a media partner of the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership, which has a bald eagle nest monitoring program, you are sharing data back and forth with them, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris Eberly is actually on the steering committee. He's the director for the partnership.
Okay, so he's probably going to find some nests he didn't know about, and vice versa. You're going to find some nests that you didn't know about.
Exactly.
So win-win for all. Other than bald eagles, any birds that you've seen come into the atlas that have made you stop and say, though, that's unusual?
Well, it's pretty early. There's not too many species breeding yet, but we have had a lot of great horned owls
That's good
confirmed.
news.
I just went and saw one this weekend in Rockville.
Oh, nice.
She's sitting on her nest all tucked down, maybe 80 feet up in the
That's
fork of
awesome.
a tree. Super cool.
That's awesome. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Gabriel Foley. He's the coordinator for the 3rd Maryland DC Breeding Bird Atlas. His job is to make sure all of you out there listening in the Maryland, D.C. area will start entering birds that are breeding in your neck of the woods or beyond. You want every single bird in this. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so what... all of our native birds, we're currently going into breeding season or are already in, the raptors are already in breeding season. And then shortly thereafter, the songbirds too, right? So
Yeah, and ravens, too, are actually one of the early nesters around here.
actually, and I've seen more people on the MD Birding Facebook group seeing ravens in areas that they didn't see them before.
Yeah, ravens are actually one of the really interesting birds with this project. When it started back in like the 80s, ravens were pretty well restricted to Western Maryland.
Right.
They've been expanding eastward ever since, and we expect to see that same trend continuing.
Now, for those that don't know how to tell a raven apart from a crow, do you want to explain? The way it was explained to me, a raven is a beak with a bird attached, and a crow is a bird with a beak attached, right?
I've never heard that, but that is a really good way to make the difference.
Because the beak is so much more significant
It
on a
is.
raven. Yeah.
And the voice is very different too.
Right.
Ravens croak, crows caw.
Yeah, I heard a raven. I went up to Canada. I was in
Oh, okay.
PEI actually,
Oh, nice.
and I heard the call of a raven. And I guess we're in this valley, beautiful valley, and it was echoing across the valley, and it was such a beautiful, cool sound. And I couldn't figure out what it was because it was the first time I'd heard it.
Sure.
And then drove up past a dumpster, and there it was. Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's a sound you won't forget. All right, so ravens. What else? Every bird out there, right?
Yeah, basically, if it breeds in Maryland or D.C., we will be recording it.
Now, do you know numbers from the first 2 breeding bird atlases? How many birds you had? Go ahead.
There were 224 species that bred in Maryland and D.C., and about 200,000 individual observations were recorded
In the last one.
in the last one.
But
That's
so
right.
we know there's way more than that, right? Or we hope there is way more
in
than
terms
that.
of individual birds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's more of a count of the species and then an estimate of the individuals. I mean, it would be almost impossible to count every individual.
Right.
But we can do some estimates of abundance.
When you get into the Maryland DC Breeding Bird Atlas on eBird, what are you looking at? Tell us how this is entered.
So if you go to ebird.org/atlas-mddc, you can start a checklist. And this is basically a record of the birds that you saw at a location and a time. And it can be
Saw or heard, right?
saw or heard. Yeah.
Okay.
If you found a bird, however you did it, you can put it in. And so essentially you record where you were, the time that you started looking for birds at, and then you enter in all the species that you found and how likely they were to be breeding.
So if it's the middle of the night, as is the case quite often with barred owls, because I'm speaking about my own backyard, you're not seeing them, you are hearing them.
Right.
So you can go by the sound of both birds calling to one another or one or the, yeah. And sometimes you don't know if it's the male or female, right?
Right.
But that is asked if it's the male or female bird on the, yeah?
Yep. And so if you have that information, you can input it. If not, that's all right too.
So it's also an educational process for the user because sometimes people don't know the difference between a male and a female, for instance, barred owl or a bald eagle. Sure. Cardinal's a little bit easier. Some of the songbirds are a little bit easier, but unless you're seeing those birds of prey next to one another and the size difference between the female, which is larger, and the male, which is smaller, hard to tell.
Right, absolutely.
And hard to tell also with, okay, here's one, red-shouldered hawk.
You can't.
But there's a question about its call. Is there a difference between male and female there's no, okay.
No, Yeah, there's really no way to tell unless you see one on the nest or you see them copulating or something like that.
Okay. What birds do you miss in Canada that we don't have here?
Oh man, one of my
snowy owl.
favorite, well, yeah, snowy owls. Actually, you know what? Saskatchewan has the highest density of wintering snowy owls in North America.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm kind
One
of
of my
proud of
favorites.
my home province, so I got to throw in a shout out for it.
It's one of my favorite birds. Okay, so which one do you miss the most?
Well, there's this sparrow. I love sparrows. They're kind of underrated, and it's called the Baird sparrow. Tiny little bird, scurries around in the grass, very restricted range, mostly in Saskatchewan. And it has this beautiful tinkling song. I'm going to miss that.
And you studied sparrows in South Africa.
Yeah. This bird called a sparrow weaver. They build these amazing nest colonies up in trees. And
Like orbs, yes?
Yeah.
Because I saw a yellow and black bird that is not a sparrow in South Africa that builds a similar nest, right?
Yes.
What bird is that?
That's just a weaver.
Okay.
Yeah, there's...
He knows his birds. Yeah, so sparrows are your birds, though.
Yeah, I do love sparrows.
All right, we're going to take another short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. This is Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Gabriel Foley. He knows a lot about birds, a lot. He's the coordinator, and that's good because he's the coordinator for the 3rd Maryland, D.C. Breeding Bird Atlas. One more time on that website.
ebird.org/atlasmddc.
Okay, explain why this is important, why all this data is important, because it's a lot of data you're going to be getting.
Yeah. You can look at things at a big scale, like the populations of birds across North America, right? And some of the research that we've seen with that shows that most bird species are declining. You can also look at very detailed small scale things. And that is more what this atlas is trying to get at is, okay, we know what continental scale populations are doing. What about birds here in Maryland and DC? And so we can look at over the course of time how things have changed in our region. This is, as you said, the 3rd breeding bird atlas. So we can compare it to the 2nd and the 1st atlases and see how birds have either declined or increased.
But going back to the 1st and 2nd, the 2nd was online also?
No, actually, it was all done on paper.
So does this add a whole new dimension going forward? Were the first 2 as comprehensive as this one's going to be?
Yeah, it does add a new dimension. Not only can more people be involved, it's a little bit easier to enter data, but you can also explore more things just because you can collect more data. In the past, just because of the limitations of entering stuff on paper, you had fewer records to deal with. Now we'll have records from the entire 5-year period. Every breeding season, you can follow a nest the whole season instead of just a single record for that nest for that year.
5-year period. This will go on for 5 years.
Yeah, this is a 5-year project, so it's a pretty big undertaking.
And why did they choose 5 years as the number?
5 years is a good time to try and get a snapshot of what the breeding population is like without exhausting your volunteers.
Okay. And speaking of which, the volunteers aren't outside every second of the day during that 5-year period. This is just when you are out and about in your square, in wherever, and you see or hear birds.
Yeah.
Log them in. And
people can do this as much or as little as they want. If they have one robin that's nesting in their backyard, they can put that in. If they go out for, an entire week-long camping trip and sunrise to sunset, that's great too.
So if they are traveling, do they go into a different breeding bird atlas? If you're going to Florida, let's say, and there's one down there. Yeah, go ahead.
You can. If there's an atlas that's currently going on, there's, I think, 4 other states right now that
And what are they?
There's New York, Maine, Wisconsin just finished theirs, Saskatchewan, actually, and Virginia.
So do you compare data with these other places that are doing theirs?
We do. That's not really the focus of this project per se.
It's
but
comparing your section of the world to your section of the world.
The comparison possibilities are very large.
So you said there's only 4 other places that are doing this.
Right
right now.
Right now.
Then
Yeah.
will every place be doing this eventually?
Most places have done it at one time or another. Atlases are usually 5 years long and repeated every 20 years. So they tend to be staggered across, the U.S. and Canada. So Ontario is going to start theirs up in 2024. I think North Carolina's starting theirs up within the next couple years. PA might be starting theirs soon.
So a lot of people are probably a little scared by going on eBird because
Right.
you're looking at this website that might be new to them. There's a whole lot of information on it. They may or may not know birds well. What do you say to those people? It's really not that intimidating, right?
It's not, especially if you think of it as a learning opportunity. You are able to go into eBird and submit whatever you see. If you happen to make a misidentification and you report a bird that is, ridiculous to have in Maryland, that's okay. We'll see that, and we'll be able to contact you and ask for more information about the sighting, and you can learn from that end of things, and you'll also learn about birds just by watching them more. Mm-hmm. The Atlas is such a neat opportunity to see the birds that are in your backyard and follow them a little bit more than just, making an identification. It's really focusing on their behavior to figure out how likely it is that they're breeding. So you watch them, and as you watch them, you learn about them.
All right. So even my cardinals need to go into the Atlas at this point too. So let's talk about breeding codes.
So the Atlas really focuses on bird behavior to figure out how likely it is that a bird is breeding, and we do that by using breeding codes. So the behavior of birds that is linked to breeding is broken up into a set of roughly 20 different codes. And it's things like the bird is in the right habitat, mm-hmm. to the bird is paired up, mm-hmm. to, I found a nest, the bird is on the nest, that kind of thing.
Once babies come around, fledglings, do those get entered in as well?
They absolutely do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If the bird is doing anything related to breeding, then there's a pretty good chance that is going to be entered in.
And all of this, you can see other people's entries. And you see the map of where all these are, right?
Yep. Yeah. If you go to the Explore section, it's one of my favorite places on the website. You can see all the species that folks have entered and these codes that are associated with them. You can see how likely it is that the bird is breeding in a place. It's pretty neat. Now,
there has been some concern with birders getting doing bad things, flushing birds or too many birders at a nest site. How is that handled?
So through education, really, mm-hmm. We have a document on the website that tells you how you should be approaching a nest and dealing with it. It is easy to harm the nest, but if you know what you're doing, then it's not so bad. There's a couple of really easy things that you can do to make sure that your impact is negligible.
So don't go too close to the nest. If the bird is looking at you, you're too close, right?
I mean, you can actually go and you can check the nest contents, but...
Well, with a bald eagle nest, you're not going to want to do that. You don't just climb up the tree and say, "Excuse me,
let
me
right.
check." Okay.
No, for, raptors and things, that can be a bit of a problem. Yeah. But for songbirds, like if you have a cardinal or something in your backyard and you find the nest, you can come up to it, you can approach it, you can look at the nest contents, and then keep going, make your visit less than 3 minutes long. Check out the resources on the website to learn how to do it properly, but it's totally possible.
Perfect. One more time on the website.
ebird.org/atlasmddc.
And for you out there listening, make sure you give this Breeding Bird Atlas a look and submit some data because it's important for the birds, it's important for us. Gabriel, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Donna.
This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We'll see you next week.